The upgraded Q-5L flies out for China in War Thunder, now with bug fixes. Let's check it out. The Q-5 started out as a program in the 1960s to adapt the MiG-19 into a ground attack jet. China's Air Force was seriously lacking in dedicated strike aircraft, and the Q-5 promised supersonic performance with a redesigned nose that had enough internal room to house an advanced targeting system. Advanced for the 1960s anyway. The first generation of Q-5 models included the basic attack jet, a torpedo bomber built in very small numbers, a nuclear strike version, and a slight redesign that boosted internal fuel capacity. These were followed on by a second generation of versions in the late 1970s and early 80s that added more weapon hardpoints, compatibility with a wider range of air-to-air missiles, and continually more advanced targeting systems. Plans were even underway to upgrade the Q-5 into a third generation using Western electronic systems. But after the Tiananmen Square massacre and subsequent arms embargoes, that never panned out, and the third generation of Q-5s would have to wait until the 1990s. The L versions are all rebuilt from older Q-5-2 airframes, that's Roman numeral 2, and they represent the ultimate version of the plane, with upgraded targeting systems that include a FLIR unit, a low-light targeting unit, a new HUD, dramatically improved navigation and radio equipment, and most notably, the ability to carry a laser targeting pod, along with laser-guided bombs. This gave the Q-5L a precision strike capability that was far superior to earlier versions of the aircraft, but it's still based on a design from 1952, and it was starting to show its age as soon as it was introduced. Only a small number have been converted from older airframes, and it isn't known exactly how many actually entered service. As with other Q-5 jets in War Thunder, there are a number of technical problems with how they're implementing this jet, and it's lacking countermeasures as well as the ability to carry air-to-air missiles, both of which that it had in real life. For whatever reason, the snail just can't seem to get the Q-5 series right. What we get in War Thunder is the Q-5L, a strike aircraft in rank 7 of the Chinese air tree with a battle rating of 9.7. This jet has a full ballistics computer for all of its air-to-ground weapons, a built-in forward-looking infrared system, which is not the same as an IRST like the MiG-23 has, and it has a radar warning receiver. However, as of making this review, it's still missing any kind of countermeasures. Hopefully they'll eventually fix that. This plane has the same Type 23 cannons as the earlier Q-5s, which frankly aren't very good guns for air combat, but they still work fine for ground attack. The external loadouts include dumb bombs, rocket pods, and laser-guided bombs in different combinations across both wing and fuselage hardpoints. Notably, it can also carry the PSZ-1 targeting pod, but doing so sacrifices the centerline bomb load, and if you want to use any of the LGBs, you gotta take the pod. A special note is that if you do take the targeting pod, it's in addition to the built-in FLIR rather than replacing it. So you have to cycle through the FLIR first if you want to change your camera view into the targeting pod, which can cause you to lose a laser lock on a target that's outside of your FLIR's narrow field of view if you had lased it from the external view and you're trying to cycle through and switch into the pod, like to zoom in on it. The laser-guided bombs it can carry include the TS-250 and the LS-500J. In short, it can take little ones or big ones. Regardless which you take, it only gets 2 of them, so there isn't really any advantage in the TS-250, aside from a trivial difference in flight performance before you drop them. Although the smaller ones do take less spawn points in ground battles, so they'll still get some occasional use. The flight performance of the Q-5L is quite good. This plane is fast, with great acceleration and a very strong rate of climb. In fact, without any external weapons, if you speed up to about 700 kilometers an hour right after takeoff, which doesn't take very long, you can throw this thing into a 60 or 70 degree vertical zoom climb and just boost off into space like it was nothing. It caps out at a little over Mach 1, so around half the jets it'll get tiered into will be able to outrun it in terms of overall maximum speed. But with its quick acceleration, you can occasionally catch up with faster jets, like in a tail chase, for just long enough to take a shot on them before they start to pull away. Its turn performance is kinda situational, and it's got some caveats. Obviously, it flies better without an external weapon load, and this is one of the jets where the fuel load absolutely does matter and impacts performance in a noticeable way. Also, for whatever reason, just like the earlier Q-5s, this jet's controls compress really badly when it's accelerating. So if you get into a dogfight, consider turning off the afterburners or just throwing out the air brake for a second as you start up your turns. Now, in terms of its overall maneuverability, the Q-5 can outturn roughly half of the aircraft it gets matched with, and it's especially strong against A-10s and other heavy subsonic jets, where the Q-5L can use its excellent engine power to keep the fight vertical and energy trap the other planes staying above them. Against more dedicated dogfighters, though, the Q-5L can slowly be outrated in prolonged turning fights. So if you've got an energy advantage at the start of an engagement, don't overlook just running away. Now, taking the Q-5L into air battles can be a lot like flying the earlier Q-5 jets or maybe the Su-7. You've got speed and a respectable bomb load for the first time in the Q-5 series, but no air-to-air missiles and no countermeasures. Now, without a bomb load, the Q-5 can be used as a credible gunfighter, but its Type 23 cannons have really wonky ballistics, and I've always found them to be very difficult to hit air targets with. Doing ground pounding in air battles is much more effective than with earlier Q-5s, as the increased bomb load and the ballistics computer let you do more base damage, or you can go around cleaning up AI ground units. Either way, this can be a reasonably strong grinder, but unfortunately, the precision-guided weapons are kind of wasted in air battles. The Q-5L's obvious specialty, though, is close air support. Even without the laser-guided bombs, the full ballistics computer makes all of its weapons completely viable for attacking enemy ground units, and you shouldn't pass up the opportunity to jump into this jet just because you don't have enough spawn points for the LGBs. It does take some practice to get good with the dumb bombs and rocket pods, and the rocket pods can be especially dangerous to attack with since you have to fly in close with no countermeasures. But the unguided weapons are still a credible threat. Flying out with the LGBs gives the Q-5L the ability to do guided weapon strikes from high altitude, or even attack moving targets during a high-speed, low-altitude fly-through. Now, since the plane gets an auto-tracker, you can use the bombs to go after enemies from a distance and still guide it in as they move around, but the usual close air support caveats still come into play. Mainly that if you drop from high altitude, it's possible that the target is going to get killed before your bomb lands. And if you drop during a high-speed pass, it's possible that the target will move out of your bomb's maximum impact zone even if you keep it lased. Now, you can use the laser designator from the external view, or cycle through it into the targeting pod, but just be aware that you have to cycle through the FLIR into the targeting pod, and if a currently lased target is outside the field of view of the FLIR, like if it's behind you or off to the side a bit, you're going to lose the lock before you get into the pod, and your bomb will be wasted, so be careful with that. Visually, the Q-5L is a great-looking jet, just like the earlier Q-5s. It's got a sleek, fast-looking design that's always appealed to me, and it also gets a few custom skins, including the awesome 10th anniversary paint job. Overall, really good-looking plane. Landing this jet is reasonably basic without any huge caveats. It can bleed off energy pretty easily on final with the air brake, and it can safely drop gear and flaps at really high speeds, so you don't have to worry too much about those. It also gets a drag chute, so the landing run is pretty short, and unless the jet is seriously damaged, landing the Q-5L shouldn't be a problem. The cockpit is wonderfully detailed, with a useful heads-up display, instruments in easy-to-find locations, and pretty good visibility. No visible radar warning receiver, which is an annoyance of mine, but overall, it's a pretty good cockpit for a ground attack jet. To close out on the Nanchang Q-5L. This jet gets a full ballistics computer along with a FLIR system. It can take a laser designator pod with a thermal sight, auto tracker, and a pretty strong optical zoom. It gets laser-guided bombs to go with that targeting pod. It's got plenty of engine power, and it's reasonably agile in close air combat. However, no countermeasures, no air-to-air missiles, its guns can be pretty difficult to use against air targets, and its overall bomb load is only medium. The final verdict on the Q-5L is that this is by far the best version of the Q-5 for ground attack, and it finally gives the Chinese air tree some good fixed-wing close air support with laser-guided bombs. This fills a gap in the lineup, and with a little practice, it's a great plane that can outperform its limitations. As always, thanks for watching.